welcome back, guys. As Erica said in the last episode, we wanted to give you guys a little insight into who we are. And if you haven't watched the last episode, go back and do that. We have been doing this for over a year now. And yeah, it's super exciting. We're super grateful to be doing it. But we just wanted to share who we are, give you guys some insight into that, our stories. How did we become who we are today? What brought us here, our childhood, right? And how did Erica become who she is today, where she's at right now in this point in time? So it's going to be, a brief look into who she is, but we just wanted to get right in. So Erica, tell us about
the cutest.
Tell us about who you are. Did you grow up in the church? What was your childhood like?
Yeah, I think after hearing your story, I think I kind of did grow up in the church, honestly. But
okay.
Just a little bit. So here, the backstory is my dad. He is only child. He grew up in Compton Watts area, and so he just kind of dove into the lifestyle of like gangs and drugs, and met my mom in, I want to say, the 80s, sometimes in the 80s, and he was just kind of out there, that lifestyle, like selling drugs and doing all this stuff. And so long story short, he ended up actually selling drugs to an undercover cop and was sentenced to 2 years in prison. And in prison, it was where he was invited to a Bible study. I think somebody invited him to like a Christian faith-based type of Bible study, and he went and he got saved. And so when he got out of jail, he and my mom, they I don't know if they got married when he was in prison or if they got married when he got out of prison, but either way, they started to do the whole Christian lifestyle thing. So they started to go to church. And at the time of when he was in prison, my mom was actually pregnant with me. And so he kind of missed the birth of when I was born, and things like that. So got out of jail. They started doing the whole Christian thing. They were going to church. And I always say this, and I want to have a conversation with my mom about it to get the real story. But I always felt as if she was being the good wife, if you will. Like she got saved and she was doing a whole church thing because her, husband had this newfound thing that he was really radically passionate about. So doing the whole church thing. And I just remember very glimpse of it. Honestly, most of it is like a blur, I'm gonna be honest. But I remember going to different types of churches, Kojic churches, Baptist churches. And if my mom were to tell the story, she would tell you we got kicked out of a lot of churches. My dad was very much a nonconformist, and he would always question things. So I remember, for instance, one of the pastors said, "Hey, Minister Eric," or whatever they called him. They were like, "I feel like the Lord is telling you, to be my armor bearer, drive me around, and things like that, take me on my errands." And my dad's he was very much where is that in the Bible? Where do you find that? Where is that biblically? So because of those questions, and because I believe pastors couldn't handle the weight of his questions, they would kick him out. And so, we got kicked out of several churches. The one that I do remember, which is I think the last church that we went to as a family, is it's Pastor Ron Hill in Compton. I think he's in Compton, Carson area. I can't think of the name off the top of my head, but pretty well-known pastor in Compton area. So we did that. And then when I was 8 years old, well, prior to 8, when I turned 8, I just remember my parents, their relationship was in shambles. I just remember coming home, seeing my parents just fight and argue, bicker, and all this stuff. It was just kind of wild. And when I was 8 years old, they let us know. I think they sat us down separately and said, "Hey, our marriage just isn't working out. And so we've mutually decided that we're going to get a divorce." And I think a lot of it is kind of such a blur. But what I do remember is, I don't know, just asking questions of hey, even as a young girl, just wondering okay, did we try? What was going on and things like that. And so, the divorce was interesting for me as a young girl. We obviously lived with my mom, and my dad, he didn't necessarily have the tools and to be the man that God was calling him to be, or to be a father, really. His parents were very disconnected, disengaged, weren't very present in his life. And so if he were to tell it, I'm sure he'd say, bring that up of like, he didn't really have the tools to be the father that he desired to be. But from my lens, he wasn't there. He was pretty absent. I just remember moments where we would, my mom would drop it. Like, she was so petty. Like, she was a single mom doing all that she could to make sure that we were good. And she had moments where she would just drop us off at like his porch and say, you do it. Like, if you can't do it, this was after the divorce. Like, she'd drop us off at his porch and say, you know what, I'm giving the responsibility over to you. So it's just like some weird, crazy stuff. But yeah, live with my mom. And I want to say for maybe 3 or 4 years, we really left God, church. I don't remember going to anybody's church house until maybe I was 14 or 15 years old. I remember my mom had went to visit a church in Long Beach. Was a pastor there, and she's like, hey, I found this church, like, I think that y'all would really like it. And from my experience going to church with my dad, it felt very cultish and legalistic and a real dogmatic in a lot of ways. But I will say though, my dad growing up was I would say he was the only person that I saw genuinely love the Lord. Although it came out or felt cultish, I just think that he was misguided in a lot of ways. He didn't have a pastor walking alongside of him to really disciple him and to like teach him God's ways. And so he was like, yeah, we couldn't watch Simpsons. We couldn't listen to rap music. And my family, everybody knew it too. Like when my mom and my dad was married, they know like, oh, you guys don't play rap music. Don't, watch Simpsons. You can't do all of these things. And so for me, yeah, when we stopped going to church, it felt like freedom to me. But he genuinely loved God. Like I will say that my dad was trying to figure it out. He loved Jesus. I would often see him praying on his knees, praying, and it was just really beautiful to see. And other people in my family, I just remember seeing them, preach on a pulpit on Sunday, but Monday through Saturday smoke weed. And so when my mom came to us with this whole church thing, I'm like, I don't know. Like, there was such a distaste in my mouth for it. And I was a little bit of like a skeptic, if you will. But my mom was like, it's good. Let's just check it out. And so we did. And we loved it. It was, I don't know if you've heard of him, Johnny Withers Church. And he was amazing. He was young. Church didn't feel boring. It felt like, something that we could actually get behind. They didn't have a youth group. So it was helpful that, we were able to really digest the word. But my mom was always the more like lenient one. So she, of course, was like, y'all, I don't want to force it on you, which I appreciated it. In retrospect, I was like, great, that's awesome. I don't want to force it on you. But, I will give you a choice. Like, I want you guys to come to church with me. I desire for y'all to come to church. But again, I don't want to force it on. And I don't know if that's part of her background or whatever, if she felt forced, I don't know. But yeah, so for me, I was like, yeah, I'm going to go sometimes. I was on the choir team, and I helped with like offering and stuff like that. Because I think when I was 14. And for the most part, I went, but I didn't always go. And then I think around maybe 15 or 16, it was just kind of when life just really just took a turn for me, honestly, because of my dad's absence. Your girl struggled with a lot of identity things. I did not know who I was. And because of the lack of his presence, I always sought it in other men. And so I would get into relationships, as a teenage girl and just try to figure it out. I desperately needed that affirmation and that like someone to just accept me and to feel the belonging. And so 14, 15 years old, it was around the time I started smoking, drinking, doing drugs and all of that, and living a lifestyle. I started clubbing, going to parties and clubbing at 14, 15 years old, and just kind of really living that lifestyle. And fast forward to, lost my virginity at a very young age, and things that I am not like proud to say, obviously, but yeah, that's just kind of the journey that I had went on. And I want to say, my senior year, got into a relationship, and this is kind of where literally things just begin to take a shift for me.
I have
Okay.
so many questions.
Okay. Let's go for it.
So many. Okay. You said so much, and I'm just like, whoa, whoa, like popping up. Okay. Before we get to the shift
Okay.
in your senior year, first question is you mentioned your dad and how he was kind of like non-conforming to the churches and stuff. You guys are getting kicked out of churches just because he had a lot of questions. Do you feel like your dad is just that's just his wiring to ask a lot of questions, or do you feel like he was naturally, or do you feel like he was intentionally like being rebellious, or he just naturally?
Yeah. It's funny. Yeah, because everybody's like, oh, that sounds familiar. Every time I tell the story, they're like, that sounds familiar, because I'm very much, oh, for sure. I do. I don't agree with like I'm not a yes man. I don't just go like, yeah, if you tell me to jump, I'm not saying how high. And that's just the reality. I've never conformed to, obviously I've conformed to the patterns of this world, right? But like in the literal sense of like going with the flow, it's just not my personality. So I do think that a lot of it was part of his wiring and how God made him. I think some of like what he may have seen, again, it's not my story to tell, but I think that his wiring at that time, it was how God had wired him. And then also just seeing things or like blatant weird stuff that that was asked of him, just was like, that don't sit right with me.
Yeah, it's just interesting because I told you I've been reading the arts books, and so logical is one of the wirings, and so I just like that made me think, because I heard that too as a kid, like, oh, like, why do you ask so many questions? But that's how God kind of wired some of us, is to be very logical, and we think better with questions. We think more with questions. But in the Black community, in the Black culture, I know that's very like standoffish. Like,
for sure,
you're asking questions, you're questioning.
You just get in line.
Yeah, right. So that was one of the things. Okay, another thing you said was, okay, so you said at 8 years old, your parents sat you down and was telling you guys that their marriage wasn't working, they were getting a divorce. At that point, were you okay? So you said mom was pregnant with you when she kind of started going to church.
Yep. So like maybe 1991.
Okay.
Once my dad got out of prison.
Were you guys going to church as like a baby?
Oh, no. Okay. You know what? It's something I have to ask, because again, it's like such a blur. I don't remember going to church. Like I remember like glimpse of when I was 5 years old. I remember when my mom had my sister, someone picked me up from kindergarten. Like I remember that. I don't remember going to church at that time though. So like little glimpse, I don't know. That's a good question. I wonder, which is why I always say like I didn't really grow up in the church, because
you don't remember, you don't have English.
I don't. Yeah.
I was gonna ask, like, when they told you that, did you if you were in the church, did that make you question your faith, or but at that point you don't remember?
I don't know that it made me question my faith as much as it made me question our reputation, if you will, because we were seen as like, oh, we're the little church family. And so when our world came crumbling down, I've struggled up until the last maybe 6 to 7 months of my life with the idea of looking good, and that stems from childhood, right? Like it's a whole bunch of things that kind of come into play with that. And part of that, that idol to look good, which I think a lot of people do struggle with, is like, dang, like we were the good family, like the church going family. What are people gonna think of us now? So it was more of the image of our family
identity
and our reputation of being, a good godly family. And then if God couldn't sustain this, what would people think about it? And so that was a big struggle for me. And I don't think I realized that until, some of my teenage later years of like, dang, like, there was a lot of shame around that divorce, other than, in addition to like the abandonment and struggling, just in my identity. The shame of like divorce is brutal. It's brutal.
Yeah, thank you for sharing.
For sure.
I had another question. So because you kind of talked about a little bit how you guys were seen as like the church family,
the Fanales.
So was your other family members, you said some of your family members would preach and then smoke weed? So.
Not really. There was some of my extended family that did go to church and things like that, and was very heavily involved in ministry. And so, and my grandma has been a Christian for years. She went to Biola, got her degree in biblical studies, theology, and things like that, and ultimately went down nursing. But she's been saved for years. And I know, like, my maternal side specifically, there are some Christians there. On my paternal side, my dad, actually, his parents were Jehovah's Witness, so he wasn't really practicing it. I'm sure he grew up in it, but as as he later on, as he got older and kind of got introduced, because of his family being from Watts, gangs, drugs, and all that, as he got introduced to that, he wasn't a practicing Jehovah's Witness. But my grandma, she practiced it for years. My dad's mom practiced it for years, and that was her religion until she later had an encounter with Jesus and became a Christian later on in her life. And so my dad's side, not really. My mom's side, very few extended family.
Okay. Yeah. I just thought that was interesting how you said, like, your family knew, like, okay, we don't do this. We don't get to watch this.
It was the funniest thing ever. Like, we'd get in the car and, like, they'd be playing Jay-Z, like, hey, or something like that. And you got to turn it down, like, turn it off. And I'm like, no, let's listen. I want to listen. Let me listen. That's all I wanted to do. I just wanted to listen to some Jay-Z, watch Simpsons in peace.
Oh my gosh, that is hilarious. Okay. And then you did mention that you were going clubbing and stuff.
Oh, for sure.
14 and
my
15.
mom would give me her driver's license at like 14, 15.
I'm done with your life.
And I was in, but for the most part, though, the clubs were, for context, my cousins worked at clubs and they had friends. And so they obviously, I drank and stuff, like, but they had their friends who worked like security guards, bouncers, I guess you would call them. They would watch me like the whole night to make sure I wouldn't get drink, because they knew I was underage. And so I would pre-game before that. So then when I got into the club, I'm just there to dance. I'm not drinking or anything like that. So they would like pay attention. But I was part of the party scene. I did all types of partying growing up. I mean, it was pretty wild. I mean, I've seen people get shot right in front of me. I remember being in a party one time and the shooter's literally where the camera is right here. And he opens fire and starts shooting, and we're all literally running. I got thrown onto her like a doggy pal. Sprained my ankle, just some wild, crazy stuff. And crazy story. I remember, and I'll probably get into it a little bit more, but me and my friends were at a party in Compton, and we just felt uneasy. None of us knew the Lord, just felt uneasy. So my friend was like, hey, let's just stop and pray before we go in. Wild. And so we did. We stopped and prayed, and we get into the party, little small Compton house, and we just like, this is boring. So we were like, let's go. Like, we decided to leave. We leave. 10 minutes later, we get a phone call from our friend that was there and said, I'm so glad y'all left. They just shot up the party.
Girl, I feel like we have so
wild stuff. So it's just like,
right.
Just so many moments of like God's hand being on my life all throughout. Like, I could date back to being a young girl, having visions, seeing and knowing that like I'm marked for something.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's crazy. I just feel like we do have very similar stories because, I didn't grow up in church, but I've had many encounters like at parties, and I didn't go to clubs. I wasn't in clubs at that age, but, going to parties, house parties, stuff like that, where people were shooting stuff up, and similar situations where God was like, we were just like, hey, like, let's leave. This isn't it. And get a phone call. I remember on Carson, dang, what is that place? It's a popular little burger spot. But I remember getting a call, and the party had just gotten shot up. A girl got shot up right in front of us at the end of a football game after we were leaving. So it's crazy to just hear how our stories have some of the same pieces in it. Our dads are very similar. Okay, so you said when you became a senior, something happened, and that was the real shift.
Yeah. I think it was maybe a junior year where I had a best friend, and we grew up together, went to elementary together, and I just started really smoking weed heavily, and I was like, I want something different. Like, I actually want to graduate high school on time, because not a lot of people in my family had graduated high school up until, so it was a really big thing for me. Like, I could count on like one hand how many people actually graduated from high school. So it just became a thing, like, where I was like, you know what, I actually want to graduate. I had ninth grade year, I did well. because I was at Compton High and I was living with my dad because my mom was in prison at the time. And my dad was he's like, so you gonna get good grades. So I did well. Mama got out, started, mom, yeah. Grades just went down, and I just didn't care. Like that's the one thing I'm like, I wish I would have like experienced high school. Like I barely went to prom. I didn't want to be involved. I always thought everyone was childish. I'm like, these kids, I didn't hang out with people that was in my high school because I just thought everybody was childish. I'm hanging out with grown people doing life outside of here.
Like
So to come here,
like
all my friends were all my friends have always been like 10-15 years older than me. Yeah. So the kids at high school, I'm like, they're so immature. So I wasn't present in high school. But
where
11,
did you meet these friends?
just through cousins. Like I've always hung out with my cousins. My cousins are older, like 10 years older than I am.
Okay.
And so we had friends, their friends kind of sometimes were our friends. And so 14 years old, hanging out with 20 something year old women, And so, so 11th grade, I'm like, look, I think I had a conversation with her. I was like, I'm going to stop smoking weed. Like I want to do better. Like I want more for myself. And, the hard part about sometimes when you take a shift or when you're wanting something more different, everybody's not up for that. Right. And she wasn't up for it. And so I still loved her, still called her my best friend, but the directions were different, the values became different. And so I did. I smoked occasionally, I'm not gonna say I completely stopped, but we were smoking every day. It was just insane, and so I wanted better. I started doing better. So 12th grade year, I'm crunching it. I'm in night school, Saturday school, summer school, just to make up the credits, to be able to graduate. And so I'm on track to graduate, and they're like maybe 1 or 2 semesters before graduation, there's a new boy that comes to the school, and his name's Timothy, and all the girlies were on him. They're like, oh, he's all this stuff. And so I was like, he cool or whatever. And one day I'm walking out, and he's like, hey, like, putting his arm around me, like I would love to like hang out or whatever. Long story short, I ended up dating Timothy, and Timothy would be considered in the worldly sense like a first love type of thing. I really like, I had dated, like my mom would let me date I think she let me date when I was like 15. And so, but they were all just like little kiddish stuff. This is my first like really like serious relationship. So once I graduated high school, I gave all of my attention to this relationship, and
you graduated?
I graduated high school. I got into this relationship, and a lot of my time and energy was spent on investing in this relationship because, I'm in love. I'm, the butterflies and all this stuff. So I think this is going to be, something really long term. And I ended up getting pregnant at 18. I had an abortion, and then I think 1 year later, I get pregnant again, and this time I'm pregnant with twins. Jeez. And life is just stressful. This relationship, again, similar to what you said, like it was this like situationship, if you will, because we were dating, but it didn't feel exclusive, and it was just, what are we doing here? We're arguing all the time, and so I'm pregnant. And I guess there was this unspoken pact or agreement that we had was like, if ever I got pregnant again, I would abort the baby again. But I don't remember ever making an agreement. So this time when I find myself pregnant, I'm like, hey, I want to keep the baby. And it just became this whole thing where it was like, oh, I feel betrayed, blah, 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 blah. So long story short, I was stressed out. This relationship was really doing a number on me. And I decided to keep the babies. But I think because of just the stress and probably being high risk, I ended up losing the baby stillbirth. And so I was almost like maybe 5.5 months pregnant, went through the whole, pregnancy, labor thing. And that was just traumatic in itself. And it was just really hard. And I had a cousin who was pregnant around the same time. And we were showering her at her baby shower. And just all of the emotions and all of the grief and all of the loss. And I want to say maybe a year. Timothy and I weren't together. He was actually he moved back to Las Vegas, and I'm living, in the Paramount area. And so 1 year later, still not really knowing the Lord, but like seeing like it's going to sound really, really weird, but it was such a God thing. I had always had this belief that I would never have kids outside of wedlock since I was a young girl, little girl. I said, I'll never have kids out of wedlock. I saw the damage that it did on my family. I saw the effects of it on like the single mothers in my family, and how hard it was for my mom as a single mom. Not that she had kids out of wedlock, but just seeing all of the single moms in my family. And I was like, I'm going to break that. That's something that I will not carry on to the future, and I don't want for my legacy. And so I just saw that as like, okay, God, like I see you. Thank you. Because again, like had I had the kid, I'm 19 years old. Can you imagine me with like, how old would they be? I can't imagine. I'm childish. But like he's living in Vegas. We'd be doing like, how does that even work? You're in Vegas, I'm here, you know, how does that work? And so I thought it was a whole God thing, honestly. And I after that, you know, the relationship got really rocky. I remember I became bulimic and making myself throw up every single day because I was struggling with my body image. Timothy had a look of women that he really liked. And so after all of the pregnancy, I became really like skinny and just unhealthy. But at the same time, I had lost some of the weight that I had picked up from after high school. So I was like, okay, you know, I'm gonna try to keep this off, you know, so that I can keep him, you know, just doing ways so that I'd be able to keep this relationship. But yeah, it was just like a wild thing. He ended up sleeping with like a cousin of mine, not my biological cousin, but then it was just like God like showing me like, come on, girl, like, come on, you know, like I didn't know it was God, but I do believe that God was moving and speaking. And so, yeah, I had this another moment, like epiphany of like, I want more for my life. Like there's actually more. And this song really ministered to me. It's called Who You Are by I think it's like Alicia or something like that. It's like a secular song. But I'm like, and I know people might get offended by that, but I do feel like that song really ministered to me, and God was reminding me of like who he had originally told me I was from the very beginning, like the dreams, the visions, the seeing that he had showed me as a young girl. And so I severed that relationship right away. But yeah, and so after that, like I picked up my life. I took every ounce of pain that I had, you know, endured, every trauma, and I just turned it into purpose. And I threw myself into the fashion industry, became a wardrobe stylist. 2 months into that, became a celebrity wardrobe stylist. Wow. But then I'm on red carpets. I'm at these events.
How
and it's
old
like,
were you at this
I was 20. Like wow. 20, 21, yeah, okay. Doing all this. And it was incredible. But like, still, there was just this longing, girl. I was just like, what am I doing? Like, you know, like, yeah, I'm not on a red carpet and, you know, VIP and it looks great on the outside. But like, honestly, like, honest to God truth, nobody knew that I would go home and I'm like weeping because I'm like, I just still feel like that my life is nothing right now. And like, there is a more that I want. And so, yeah, it was just like God just speaking to me, and I ended up getting into another relationship with a guy, and I was in that relationship, great guy, but as like God's doing something in my heart, I just remember like I gotta sever this too. You know, I think I could start to see the patterns now. Now I'm being aware of my patterns, and I'm being aware that, you know, I keep going after relationships, trying to feel something. And all along, God's been chasing, he's been pursuing me all along. And so, yeah, I think it was 2012. So I'm in this relationship, doing the fashion thing. It's great. 2012 is just kind of that like pinnacle moment for my life where, yeah, I stole a book from my grandma's house. My cousins had moved out and they left the book in the drawer. And I don't know why I'm going through the drawers. This is weird. I'm going through the drawers and then I see a book called How to Find God. And so I've always loved to read. But I didn't know why I got this, but I took it home, put it on my shelf, and didn't know why I would take a book on like God. Because again, at that point, I wasn't interested. Like I would go to church, here and there. I would say I was like a Easter's, Mother's Day, Christmas type of church goer. And so, yeah, I took this book and it just sat on my like shelf for collecting dust for months. Until, you know, one day I remember it was like a series of events that happened. Went to church with my mom. I'm hungover, and there's this lady to my left, and she's just praising God with so much freedom. And it was a silent prayer. Again, I wasn't speaking it out, but it was such a silent prayer. Like, I want that. Like, I want that. And maybe months later, It's so funny. I met a friend, a guy through my friend. I think I don't know if they had a situation going on, but he would invite me to Bible studies. And I was like, oh, I'm good. I'm not really interested. And then one time he was actually going to Your Now Church, Zoe, and they would, Bishop Ed and his wife would take a group of people to Night of Hope, Joel Osteen. And I went with them. So he invited me. I was like, okay, I'll go. I'll see what it's about. And so I went with them. And I was like, wow, I was really inspired. It was really great. But still like nothing. I was like, I felt good. It was like a good feeling, and had never felt something like that without being, inebriated or something. So yeah. But then fast forward, one night I'm just like broken and in a lot of my shame and just trying to figure out life. And with the questions of like, what's the more, I know there's something more. I don't know what the more is, but I know that there is something. And so I just remember, because again, the blur of my childhood and going to church, but I do remember going to like old churches where they had church mothers. I don't know if they still have church mothers now, but they had church mothers. And I just remember hearing them say, just call on the name of Jesus and like, he'll help you. If like you need help, call on the name of Jesus. And me being a skeptic as much as I am, I was just like, you know what? At this point in my life, like, honestly, like, I don't have anything else. I don't have anything to lose. What do I have to lose? I'm already depressed and broken, struggling, like trying to figure it out. Life looks good, but it don't feel good. There's more. So I was just like, I pulled that book down. I didn't have prayer language. I wasn't eloquent. I wasn't trying to like, I'm just praying because I need help. And I remember I prayed. I was like, God, I need help. And I heard God's voice for the first time in my life. And I knew it wasn't mine because it wasn't like typical language that I would use. And I just remember hearing God say, get ready. You're getting ready to give birth to a new you. And I didn't know what that meant but then in retrospect, looking back, I went by Mookie. All throughout my high school career, everybody called me Mookie. Mookie. It was a name that was given to me. My parents called me Mook as a term of endearment, but my friends twisted it and said, no, we're going to call you Mookie. They gave me that name. I was like, I'll take it. And so that night, I believe that God changed my name. Wow. Like he took me from Mookie back to Erica, the original design that he created me before the foundations of the world. And the rest is history.